Okay, so I think there's a group that had a falling tree. If you want a tree to fall, it's fairly simple. You can do it one of two ways. Okay, so let's first create a tree. So we go to create geometry, and we want to change that to AC extended and choose foliage. Let's choose a tree that's pretty tall. Well, let's just choose the typical tree. Let's go to modify, change the change to about 30 feet. But let's modify this tree a bit. So let's say you wanted the tree to have a longer trunk. Well, that option isn't here for it to have a longer trunk. However, you could add a modifier. Remember, modifiers are here to modify what exists and to give you additional parameters where it's not provided. So if I choose edit to add a edit poly modifier, or in this case I would add a edit mesh modifier, and I choose vertex mode, I could potentially increase the height of this element here, which is the trunk. So I'm gonna select the bottom half of this and use my move tool and just move that down, and I have a very, I guess, weird looking tree, but the trunk is taller. Alright, now let's say I want this tree to fall. Alright, so well, firstly, the UCS is in the center of the tree and not at the base of the tree. Why that is important? Because if I choose rotate now, it's going to rotate based on where the UCS is. So I may want to move that UCS down. In order to do that, I go over to hierarchy, that is here, and when I click hierarchy, I choose affect pivot point only, enable that checkbox, and if I go to my move tool, that allows me to move only the pivot point. So I want to put it somewhere down there. Turn that off, and now I'm able to rotate based on here. Now there are basically two ways you can make this tree fall. You can do it the quick and dirty way, which is simply to turn on set key and take a keyframe here, move forward in time, and take a keyframe there, like that. But this looks a bit weird. I mean, it kind of looks, you know, not very natural, but if it gets the job done, it's up to you. A more natural way to allow the tree to fall would be to use what we did in class, which was the Mass Fx, which is basically simulation in Max. So let's try that out. So I'm deleting those keyframes, and I'm going to go for my Mass Fx toolbar, which is, to get it, I need to right click any empty space and enable Mass Fx, and that's this toolbar. We should remember it. It allows us to simulate real world effects such as gravity and all that stuff in Max. So now the trick is that we don't want to use this tree. Well, I wouldn't use this tree to simulate the tree falling. The reason I don't want to do that is because it's a pretty complicated object. It has all of these stuff here, and you may have other objects that you want to have falling in the class. So the best way to simulate stuff is to actually create like a dummy object around it and not use the actual high detail object, because it's going to take much longer for Max to simulate all of these little ins and outs and stuff that's on this object. So let's create a dummy object. A tree is basically like a lollipop, so we could just go to create and go to geometry, but this time we want to go to standard primitives and we want to create a cylinder. Let's just create a dummy object of this, so we can use a basic cylinder. Then we can use a sphere, so let's create a sphere. I want to use the move tool, move that up top, and let's select both of them and just move them in the general location. Let's make this a little bigger. There we go. And let's increase the height. Okay, so this now, if max is to simulate that, let's put this in the center. This would be much easier. Let's go to a top view, you know, just to ensure that we have a center. There we go. All right, there we go. Much easier for Max to simulate this shape because it's very basic. All right, now the next thing we want to do is we want to convert all of this to editable poly. So let us, or rather, let's not use a cylinder. Let's use, and you'll see why a little later, I want to use a pyramid. A pyramid is even more simple. If I hold control, then it actually becomes an equilateral, it becomes a square. So I release, set the height, there we go, and I'm gonna turn this upside down like that. And instead of using a cylinder, I'm going to use a pyramid. Let's make sure that's in the center. So I've gone to top view, and it doesn't have to be 100% accurate. It just needs to be round about there. Well, for one, this is a much simpler shape than the circle. It has less polygons, and we want the tree to fall, so I want it to be at a point and not necessarily on a flat surface. So that's why I want to use this pyramid. Alright, so next we want to attach these together. So to do that, we're going to convert this to an editable poly. Right click, convert to editable poly. Then we want to go over to modify for this editable poly and look for attach. And we want to attach this shape. Let's turn off attach now. So great, so now this is one shape, and this is what we're going to use to simulate the tree falling. And again, because this is a much simpler calculation for the computer to make than this, that's very complex. Alright, so okay, so now on to using the Mass Fx tools. Hopefully we all remember how that works. The gravity will affect anything that is a rigid body, so we want to turn this into a rigid body by clicking on it, and we want to convert this to a rigid Mass Fx rigid body by just clicking this icon. Alright, so it is now a rigid body, and all we have to do now is press play and watch what happens. It should fall by itself. There we go. Alright, great, so we have a more natural falling tree there. So let's back up by pressing this. Alright, so we could now in the modify for the rigid body change the object, the preset to like let's use like concrete. I mean, I know it's not concrete, but that's the closest thing that we've got, so let's just use concrete. Alright, so now we're going to simulate this fall, and then we're going to apply it to the tree. So let's play again. Oh wait, I think that this back up, this is a little bit above ground, so we want to carry it just a little bit down like that. Hit play now. Yeah, that's okay. And bam. Alright. So we know that that will take about 500 frames to happen. So just know you need 500 frames to let this tree fall. Okay, so now we're gonna open this checkbox here, and we are going to now simulate we're gonna now bake 500 frames. So we go over to this little tool box here, and we want to change the length of our animation to 500. And okay, now let's just bake this. So we bake it by clicking bake selected. And what we're going to do after we bake it is we're going to do a quick and dirty trick so that you will have the flexibility to move this around. Because notice after you do this, you try to move it, it doesn't move, which is just a feature. Basically, Max is saying that look, once you put it in place, you wouldn't necessarily want to move it around. Now, because you may want to do that, a quick little trick that you can do is go to File, Export, and let's do that again. You go to File, Export, hover over Export, and then you choose Export Selected. I'm going to export mine to the desktop. I'm going to call it Falling Tree, and choose Export as an FBX. Under Animations, I want to make sure I check Animation. Then I want to make sure I check Bake Animation, and I also check Resample All. Choose OK, and that's it. Now I can delete that object and import, and I will import Fallen Tree. Choose OK, and now I can move this anywhere I want, and it will always animate anywhere I put it, which is what I really want to do. There's a little, you might get a little glitch at the front. All you need to do is really just remove that first keyframe. Right, there we go. Move it anywhere I want, and there we go. Alright, so now what I want to do is put it there, and I'm going to use another constraint now. I'm going to constrain the tree to this object. So I click on the tree, and I'm going to go to Animation, Constraints, and I could use a bit here. I could use attachment constraint. Okay, let's use the link icon, which is this icon here. So just to not make this confusing, I want to link the tree to this object. So I'm going to choose link, and I'm going to drag from the tree. You're going to get this little dash line to this object. Notice it's highlighted yellow, and I'm going to release. Now they are both attached, so they will both fall. So of course I want to use my move tool and move the tree to the object. Now the object is a parent, so that means I can move the tree, it will move by itself, but if I move the parent, it will move the tree and the object. And of course all I need to do is just hide this object now, and I have my fallen tree. Timber. Now if you could also try to just animate the tree falling by itself, see how that works out for you, but the best move is to really create a dummy object and animate that. That's usually what most people do to simplify matters, and that is Fallen Tree tutorial. Quick additional step: if this tree falls too slow, you can always Let's unhide that dummy object. You can always rescale this keyframe here by choosing time configuration, rescale time, and let's let it happen in half the time, 250. So now it falls much quicker. Alright, so you can always rescale the time. Let's hide this, hit play. A bit stiff, but you know, it's not Hollywood, so it will pass.